second category of optimizations that can be made are to the settings on the ad units themselves. These are much more difficult changes to execute for a few reasons. First, they require much more technical knowledge. And second, getting the exact balance of settings to maximize revenue is tough and varies heavily on each unit, in each place you might use it. So it requires a lot of testing and adjustments to get things dialed in. And third, beyond just dialing in the right settings, it is actually more beneficial to adjust the settings based on different factors of each user session, essentially creating a unique combination of settings for each viewable impression served, meaning there is no way to do it with human or manual control. This is precisely why we've built AI and machine learning algorithms that dynamically manage ad unit settings and change refresh behavior on an impression by impression basis to maximize both viewability and revenue. And while they may be difficult to use as an independent publisher, understanding what levers you can pull is still very important. Some of the most important settings you can adjust on your ad units themselves include lazy loading. First, let's talk about lazy loading. It may be best to choose to lazy load your ads so that you aren't loading ads or making ad calls until the user scrolls to a place where the ad unit is viewable. This can help to ensure that no ad calls are made when the ad unit is out of view, thus increasing your viewability ratings. It is important to note that this is not a blanket recommendation, and sometimes choosing to use lazy loading features can reduce ad revenue without creating a large enough effect on viewability to make it worth it. It is absolutely something that should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis and will depend heavily on the placement of the ad unit in question. So just please keep in mind that this is something you should test on different ad units and placements and not consider a standard recommendation across the board. Next, let's look at the refresh settings you can adjust. Most ad units will refresh, essentially making a new ad call and replacing the current ad call with a newly served ad after a set amount of time. There are quite a few settings that control the overall refresh behavior of an ad unit, each of which can be changed, tested, and optimized to improve viewability. These settings include the time between refreshes, your total number of refreshes, refreshing when in view only, choosing to refresh on triggers or when a user action has driven a behavior, and the list continues to keep growing as the ad tech industry continues to advance. Let's go into detail about each of these settings. First, the time between refreshes. This particular setting is a can of worms all its own. Most best practices will tell you that you shouldn't refresh any sooner than 30 seconds. However, each SSP and DSP have their own rules regarding these settings, so it's hard to give clear-cut advice. What we can tell you is that you are safest with a 30-second refresh setting, even in the most restrictive of demand sources. Next, let's discuss total number of refreshes. This is the upper limit of how many times an ad will refresh before stopping. Total number of refreshes is exactly what it sounds like. You can choose to set an upper limit on the total number of times an ad unit can refresh before it stops. Typically, refreshed ad units will provide diminishing returns on CPM the higher the refresh count. You can look at your own data to determine if there is a point at which refreshed ad units just don't provide enough incremental value to continue refreshing after a certain number of refreshes. Refreshing when in view only indicates that your ad units choose to refresh only when they know they are currently visible or about to be visible in the viewport. You can go as specific as breaking down exactly what the definition is, from 50% in view to 100% in view before you choose to refresh the unit. One thing to keep in mind here is that your out of focus rate can have a huge impact on your ad call volume and subsequently your revenue when choosing to refresh only when in view. If your website has a high out of focus rate, meaning that users may keep your website open in a separate tab but not actively be viewing it, you'll find that choosing to refresh only when in view will cause a huge change in your ad call volume. Refreshing on triggers means you are using some very specific user action to trigger a refresh. This could be interaction with a certain object on your page, the act of bringing a tab back into focus, and so much more. Each of these settings are meant to serve the same goal as with lazy loading, helping to control when ad calls are being made to maximize the potential that they are getting that full 1 second of in-view time. Like the previous recommendation, the proper settings are maintaining a delicate balance between revenue and viewability. So you should test on different ad units and placements and not consider any change to these settings a standard recommendation across the board.
Learn more at www.playwire.com/ad layout training. Or if you're watching on YouTube, click the link below in the description of this video.